I've got the distinct pleasure of doing the introduction for our next segment. This is our Venture Roundtable. So you've already heard from one, right? Enrique Salem, heavy hitter, very profound. This next segment, Mia Schmitz from EVOTEK Labs is going to be the moderator of a panel of 3 of the most influential VC firms that are out there. Mia does a phenomenal job in our venture relations. She's got a lot of connections into the VC world, and she gets to interview 3 of the big movers and shakers out there. So I would like to turn this over to Mia and our Venture Roundtable.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark, for introducing us. Like he said, I'm Mia Schmitz. Today, welcome to the Venture Capital Roundtable. I'm joined by Gamiel Gran of Mayfield Fund, Guru Chahal of Lightspeed Venture Partners, and Matt Carbonara from Citi Ventures. So I'd like to kind of just get started with a little introduction for everyone. So Gamiel, I'm going to throw to you first. And I just kind of wanted to know, how long have you been in the venture world and how did you get involved in that?
So I started my career many years ago selling big old IBM mainframes longer ago than I'd like to admit, and then transitioned into corp dev and venture sort of in the early 2000 era, 2004 or 5 is when I joined. I've been at Mayfield now for 5 years, so I've worked with a couple other venture firms prior to joining Mayfield. So.
Awesome. And Guru, I know that you've been in the venture world for a while too, and you've had a hand in some really successful startups. What were those?
So Mia, just to kick things off, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. At Lightspeed, I've been now here for about 2.5 years, focusing on our early stage enterprise investments. Lightspeed in of itself is a very large global firm. As you know, we invest across all sectors and across all stages. And I'm part of the team that is largely focused on what is most relevant to this audience, which is B2B enterprise, especially investments at the early stages. And I've been very fortunate, much like both Matt and Gamiel on this call, to be on both sides of the table, the investing side of the table, as well as the business building side of the table. And some of the startups I've been very closely involved with, 2 that I was part of the builder team. One was Nuova, which was acquired by Cisco, where Matt and our paths crossed. And then another one was that I started with my co-founders called Avi Networks, which was acquired by VMware. And now I work very closely with startups in the security, automation, and cloud infrastructure space. So startups like No-Name Security in the API security space, Pensando in the cloud infrastructure space, Arcus in 5G telco routing space, and so on. So I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and that's incredible. That's so amazing that you've done all of that. And Matt, I know you kind of come from a similar but a little different side of venture with the corporate venture side of things. So explain to me like kind of how Citi Ventures influences what Citibank does from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, of course, Mia. Thanks for the question and appreciate you pulling us all together. Excited for this panel and thankful to be here. I lead our enterprise practice at Citi Ventures. So that encompasses areas like cybersecurity, cloud, developer tools, data AI, machine learning, as well as customer experience marketing and automation. And the way to think about our role within Citi is we help drive innovation within Citi. We sit inside the Chief Innovation Officer's organization. We provide thought leadership to the technology and business leaders that run the various business and functions within the bank. So we spend time with those leaders trying to understand the gaps that they have from a business and technology perspective. And then we invest in the leading companies that provide solutions to those gaps. The thought being the leading companies will help us be good investors and drive good returns for Citi Ventures, but also the leading companies will be the ones that have the most revenue, become the biggest companies, have the most R&D dollars, therefore have the best roadmaps and the most innovation to provide to Citi and the best ecosystems around them, which is hopefully the solution that Citi will end up adopting. And then once we invest in these companies, we work to get them in front of the right stakeholders and position them appropriately to hopefully get adopted by Citi to improve Citi's overall offering. So that's sort of how we help influence the bank and help provide thought leadership to our colleagues.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So I'm going to dive kind of right into some of the main questions as well that we wanted to figure out and get answered. Guru, after 1.5 years of nonstop change, how did is the venture world of today just compared to that of yesterday's? And I know that's kind of a generic one. You can laugh a little bit. But you guys are all welcome to jump in, but I wanted to kick it to Guru first.
Yeah, how has it changed compared to yesterday? It really depends on how you define that yesterday. I have never seen venture to be as exciting as any other time in my career. There's more funding available for really high quality founders to go and build the company that they've always wanted to build. There is more reception, most importantly, on the enterprise side to bring in new innovative technology in, much like Matt talked about Citi as a bank pulling in innovation. I've never seen that. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you started a startup, it would take a long time, years of actually shipping that software, and you'd sell into mid-market and other customers, and then slowly make your way up into the large, banks like Citibank and others. And today, you can, even at the design stage, when you're looking for design partners before you're shipping your product, banks, large technology companies, financial services institutions, insurance companies, healthcare institutions, retail, all of these verticals, the CIOs and CISOs are more open than ever to engaging with these companies at the earliest stage. So that combination of both the availability of capital as well as the availability of spend on the customer side means we're going to see just more than ever number of enterprise companies getting built and startups getting built. So, I'm just an incredibly bullish person when it comes to, we're going to see more startups, we're going to see more innovation. And yes, in some parts of the market that will complicate my life and Gamiel's life and Matt's life. It'll complicate the CIOs on the customer side, their lives, as they have to parse through exactly which products. But wouldn't you rather have that problem than the alternative of having a number of burning fires and no good solutions to put those fires out? Yeah. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, just to add to that, Mia, Guru said it well. I do think there's sort of two key pivots here that are really important. One is the amount of capital available is tremendous, but I think the more important, from my perspective, is the demand. We've talked over the last I'd say 10 plus years about cloud and cloud strategy and hybrid cloud and on-prem cloud. And we've talked about digital transformation, and all of a sudden, perhaps the silver lining out of this pandemic, and nobody would have asked for or wanted a healthcare crisis like this, but the silver lining from a technology standpoint is digital transformation was no longer just cool. It was how you survived. So whether you're a mortgage lender, a online banking environment, online insurance, online, just going to the restaurant using a QR code, for God's sakes, every environment for survivability is leveraging technology like never before. The drive of innovation like never before. So the demand criteria, I think, is sort of an opportunity to remake the entire stack. And in fact, we've been watching sort of the slow evolution of legacy to a cloud-first, truly dynamic IT infrastructure stack as a goal for many IT organizations as a theme. But really, we've accelerated, and people have talked about things that took years are now taking months or days. Literally last March was sort of the drop the gauntlet, and within a few days, we really transformed nearly every industry into meaningful different environments. And I think that this is a tectonic shift in the IT stack like we'll never witness again. Perhaps this is our Y2K moment, if you will, or something. But everything from multi-cloud to dynamic IP address to real-time threat intelligence, automation across the enterprise for productivity's sake, next generation cyber tools to support all of that, new data stack. All of these environments, really an opportunity from an investment perspective, but more importantly from a customer IT leader perspective, an opportunity to really innovate at scale. So,
Right. All great points. And actually, you mentioned kind of something interesting with the cloud stuff. And I noticed that one of our startups in our data center track is one of your portfolio companies. So I was kind of wanting to ask you, what do you think what's the future of that? What do you think it's going to look like with data center and cloud converging? What do you think of that?
So the company I think you're referring to is Fungible. So Fungible is thematic to the kind of way we invest, which is we have a theme we call people first investing. And Fungible is founded by the founder of Juniper Networks, Pradeep Sindhu, an amazing visionary around transformation of macro environments. And his thesis was at the founding of Fungible that the compute-centric IT landscape, driven by the x86 chip, if you will, and Moore's law, were perhaps coming to a slower growth pattern than they had realized in the early innings. And what really was changing was the way that data was being used in the enterprise, particularly is transforming the way that compute needs to support that. And so he has built a company, Fungible, that is focused on making data more accessible by creating an environment, an ASIC, a chipset, if you will, that really empowers the user to have elastic scale within their own environment for reaching that sort of data scale. So to us, it's part of this larger transformation, this macro transformation of a data-driven environment. So many of the use cases around digital transformation really optimized based upon predictability and insight and machine learning, and doing this in real time, closer to real time. Low latency is what's driving a lot of these environments. And so Fungible is right in the wheelhouse of that, making that possible across different environments. So.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Well, so, hey, I wanted to change a little bit of a gear real quick. Mark mentioned something in his presentation earlier, something that Gamiel also knows of, is that golden age of investment. When they talk about that, is that still, like, does that relate similarly, or is it just a little different from a corporate side? Does that influence how corporate investment works, or?
Yeah, I would just to pick up on what Guru and Gamiel were saying. I mean, I think the macro effects that we're seeing are similar. The implications are maybe slightly different. I think in general for large enterprises, it's great because the increased funding means there's going to be more solutions. It means the faster pace of innovation. There's going to be more choices for enterprises, large enterprises, along a broad set of categories, whether it be data, whether it be cloud, data center, cybersecurity, contact center. Like all those areas are just seeing increased pace of innovation. And part of that is because on the demand side and what's happening with technology is it used to just affect one or two industries, but now it's broadly affecting just a bigger part of the economy. And when that happens, you have more customers, which means these companies can ultimately attract larger end markets or go after larger end markets, which means they can get more funding to go after those larger markets, which means, again, more innovation and faster innovation. So I think that's really great in the sense that it's giving enterprises more choice. I think if you put your corporate hat on, what does that mean? Well, that means that's good on one side from a supply perspective. But, if you put together your Michael Porter's 5 forces, you're like, well, from a threat perspective, it's actually potentially worrisome, right? Because there's potentially more disruption to your business, potentially more threat of someone coming up with a new business model that might eventually displace you in the market, right? But it also means there's more opportunity. If you can take advantage of those changes and you can see those market trends quickly, then you can take advantage of those as well. So I think what that means is as a corporate, you need to really engage with this ecosystem and really navigate it to your benefit, or you risk being disrupted and maybe not capturing the opportunities that are there. So you really need to have a team to help you sort through all that innovation, find the best way to utilize those solutions to move your business forward. So that's sort of our role at Citi Ventures, is to help Citi think through that and help Citi do that. I will say the other thing, the increased supply of capital, and I think we probably all see it between Guru, Gamiel, and myself, is like increased competition to get into some of the best opportunities. So I think that really is a makes you as an investor really think about what your value add is and how you're going to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, which again I think is great for companies and great for entrepreneurs.
Right. So did I hear you just say correctly that there's a little bit of competition between the three of you and just venture in general, just with investment?
I love these guys. We would never compete with them.
No fights breaking out or anything.
Well, competition is important, right, for the market. We think of the macro climate as very competitive right now. There's a lot of dollars chasing perhaps fewer opportunities. If you look at some of the recent data out of CB Insights, they just produced the Q3 numbers, enormous quantity of dollars, both at a global and the US level. But diving deep into it, what we're realizing is, and we're seeing, is that fewer of those dollars are being applied to early stage. So while late stage is growing substantially, we hear about unicorns and decacorns and all of this. Really, the quandary is, are the dollars equally being applied at, let's say, seed, Series A level? And they're not. In fact, the numbers are down quite a bit year over year for seed and early stage. So we, have long been focused on early stage. It's what we've done for 50 years now. Writing that first institutional money, helping with that early design, with that entrepreneur, et cetera. And we think that that's an opportunity. So we also then partner with other venture firms for later stage, for crossover, and we work with corporate venture teams like Matt's and co-invest with Lightspeed at times and other investors as a community. So we, while we compete at times, I think we partner more often than not. So
I think there's a really interesting realization across the entire technology landscape, especially the startup technology landscape, which is that competition is not a zero-sum game. And what this additional capital has done is it's led to more startups, it's led to more of an appetite for innovation on the customer side, and it's led to larger outcomes. And so while you might think that competition drives, it's a zero-sum game and it drives sort of either Gamiel makes money or I do or Matt, and it's one or the other, it's actually not quite that way at all. And most of the early stage investors that I know and work with, including Mayfield and Citi, we're all doing quite well, thanks to the entrepreneurs who've chosen to partner with us and the companies that they're building, which are larger than ever. So it's been good, and I hope it continues.
That's awesome. I love that. It's not kumbaya, but I'm not going to say that. But yeah, that's incredible. So I do want to pivot again. I know that security's kind of been the topic of conversation for everyone recently, and I just kind of wanted to see what everyone's thought was on that. Like, what do you think that future of security looks like? Just to kind of toss more opinions into the jar.
Security is always number one. Every time I talk to an IT organization, the CISO is getting more budget and more issues to support the more budget, I guess, needs. So we're seeing issues at every level, of course. And I think the macro is more devices, more environments, broader threat surface, more issues around trust and data governance are saying that automation, meaning more predictive science, more AI, more machine learned environments, is going to be the only survival long term for most of these environments. We can't operationalize manually many of these environments. The people running SOCs or operations environments are overwhelmed with data and insight. What they need is remediation and strategy to support that. So whether that's, we've got a number of investments in the space and have been long-time investors in cybersecurity, whether it's threat intelligence, whether it's hacking, whether it's facilities management, or even data governance and trust and privacy, all of those environments. And then even further, what happens when the cookies are gone. And all of these environments represent a broader cybersecurity thesis that is, I think, just continuing to innovate pretty aggressively. So,
right. And Matt, actually, I think one of the security startups we have in our track is a Citi portfolio company. What is it that you guys saw in them, and what is it that you see in the future of security with that?
Yeah, look, I think from security perspective, I think I would agree with Gamiel, top of mind for most CISOs. I think what we see is this inability to recruit enough people to keep up with the work that needs to be done and the pace of innovation by the threat actors. And so I think what you're going to see, and I think Gamiel hit the nail on the head, is more automation, more use of intelligent systems to provide leverage to teams, probably more training for employees, so that they, many times the human element is the weakest link from a cyber perspective. So I think you'll see more training of rank and file employees, more training of developers in order to ensure that code is being developed from the first line written to be secure. And then more training for security professionals, as well as tools for security professionals to augment them, to allow them to be more effective and handle a greater volume of activity over time, because I think the volume of activity is going to continue to rise on the threat side.
Right. Well, and so, Guru, I know that you're a big security person, but I did kind of want to switch it up on you and see what is something that you see outside of security that's on the horizon, and why and when do you think that's going to be top of mind for everyone? And it's going to be the big new thing with security, or after security, or before, or whatever it is. What's your take on that?
I think it's such a great question, Mia, because it forces you to think about not just the, what's right in front of your nose, but what's coming a little bit down the pike. And I think one thing that's been simmering just below the surface for organizations is the nature of their workforce and where the workforce is located. And in every board meeting that I walk into, every CIO, every CISO, in fact, Matt just alluded to this as well, you just can't find talent, not just in security, in any function. But there was a time when somebody graduated and they had a list of 3 banks or consulting companies or something that they want to go to. Today, they can go to a startup, they can go to a large bank, they can go to a security company, they can go into healthcare, they can go into where they want. So how do you attract that talent? How do you make it easier for them to work from anywhere in the world? And I think for about the past 18 months or so, one of the things that COVID has accelerated is the flexibility in terms of how that workforce is constituted and where they work from, right? So remote work was already on the rise. In fact, I'm pretty sure Citibank used to have most of IT in a few buildings, and now it's spread all over the nation, if not all over the world. And so that trend has massively accelerated. But there was this hope, I think mistakenly, that once we get past COVID, things will go back to normal. And I don't think that's happening. I don't think once you give people the kind of freedom of location, freedom to work from anywhere, freedom of flexible work hours, I think that just stays. And there's probably going to be some snapback, but I think one of the biggest things that CIOs and CISOs, in fact, even CEOs are thinking about right now is what is the end state? And assuming that the snapback is not to where we were in 2019, but is probably going to look more like 2020 or early 21. How do I put in, from an IT perspective, security products, connectivity products, productivity products, and all sorts of other digitization technologies in marketing, sales, and so on that are going to help me be as productive and grow as fast as I was planning back in 2019. You just can't get these people in the room anymore. So I think that's one of the most profound changes that I feel are happening, which will drive changes in every sector of technology.
Right. Well, let me throw that to Matt and Gamiel as well. What is is there anything you'd like to contribute to that? Is that a ditto, or what's something you guys think?
I think Guru hit a lot of the important points around, the nature of the workforce that's probably the biggest shift. The nature of the workforce is changing, and where people want to work from, where they will work from is changing. And I think that there's a cybersecurity aspect to that. There's a collaboration aspect to that. There's a onboarding, culture building aspect to that. So I do think that's going to be a key element. The other areas that I think we're tracking and spending a lot of time around is, given that people are more remote and more transactions are happening remote than ever, and there's an acceleration of remote transactions due to the pandemic. We're spending a lot of time around what's happening in the fraud and identity spaces. We think there's a lot of interesting innovation still to be done there that can both reduce fraud and false transactions, but at the same time also reduce friction for customers as well and increase personalization. And that's kind of the holy grail. If you can both reduce what the bad actors can do, but increase the experience by reducing the friction for those that you want to do business with. We think that's a really interesting trend where we're seeing a lot of interesting companies. On the employee side, I think, again, I'll reiterate training. I think across developers, employees, and security professionals continue to see a lot of activity there. And then automation, I think, continues to be an area where people are being asked to do more with less, and that ultimately requires you to be able to offload the mundane, the routine tasks from people so that they can focus on higher order, higher value add types of activities. And I think that comes down to automation across not just the cyber area, but other areas as well. So those are the areas that I think are coming, and they'll continue to be increased innovation.
Yeah, I think Matt and Guru both nailed sort of the problem statement. As I talk to CIOs, and I spend a lot of time talking to CIOs about what the future looks like, they're under tremendous pressure to be a lot more solution orientated for the organization around resiliency than ever before. And so as they're returning to office, returning to work, RTO, RTW, whatever the acronym you want to use, they're being asked by the CEO and the board, how do we make this work? What does this new environment look like? We've reduced some real estate. We've maybe changed the way we're going to hotel employees in the organization. Some people are going to be hybrid or permanently remote. How do we measure productivity? What does collaboration look like? How do we maintain culture? And there's a lot of qualitative questions that are being put onto the CIO to have quantitative, let's say, technology-driven answers to the problem. And in not all cases is there an explicit answer yet. But I do think that this is a really interesting sort of renaissance moment for CIOs. I've talked for a number of years about what I call the 3 I's of corporate innovation, driving innovation effectively, not just showcasing companies, not just coming to Sandhill and doing the showcasing of ideas, but rather really having pragmatic innovation as a best practice. In fact, being competitive around innovation, best in class, best in your industry. And I do think that this is a rare and unique opportunity where the CIO is being pulled by the rest of the organization to drive that innovation at scale. I made a point earlier that digital transformation perhaps was cool before, and now it's required. It's a must. And even further, I do think the point that the CEO is asking the CIO. So the question I ask is, how are the CIOs taking this opportunity, taking the ring? How are the corporate innovation leaders actually driving these opportunities? How are they learning in environments like this from others? Just a real quick plug on the 3 I's of corporate innovation. Is there enough ideation happening? Do you have a best-in-class incubation process? And are you investing the right resources in the thesis to drive it? And so I think that architecting for innovation is an answer and an opportunity. And of course, we as early stage investors love it when global leaders, IT leaders partner as design partners in early product market fit conversations with our startups. So anyway, sort of a plug on what I think is an opportunity for CIOs of the future. So.
Right. All great points and all incredible points. And I know that we are coming up on our time as well right now. So I did want to leave it for if anyone wants to throw a question in the chat just in this next minute or so, fire away. But in the meantime, I just wanted to thank you guys for coming here today and speaking and having this discussion. And it's such an incredible discussion. And you guys just have so much insight into kind of the finer workings of things that I think what you guys do is invaluable. So truthfully, I really can't thank you guys enough for coming in and discussing with me today.
Well, Mia, thank you so much. And Matt and Guru, let's do some more deals together. So
100%. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Be well.